Thank you, Mr. President. Today's vote to move forward with President's nominee to join the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals is a new low. It's a new low that sets a dangerous standard for judges that have power to make critical decisions that impact the everyday lives of the people whom we serve. John Bush has a clear record. I mean, think about it. He's going to be a judge if this place moves forward tomorrow on this. John Bush has a clear record of promoting bigotry and promoting discrimination that has no place in our courts. We can't let this nomination slide through this body. Mr. Bush advocated to the U.S. Supreme Court that women should be... Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Bush advocated to the U.S. Supreme Court that women should be barred from attending our military institutions, in this case, the Virginia Military Institute. Think about that. There are people in this body that just voted on the motion to proceed, a very small majority that passed this, that they are voting for a judge that says to the Supreme Court that women should be barred from attending military institutions like VMI. He went so far as to call the legal standard allowing women to attend destructive. And we're going to put him on the court. That was in that wasn't 1950. That wasn't 1960. That wasn't in the 1970s. That wasn't even in the 1980s. It was in the 1990s that he said that. Luckily, our nation's Supreme Court disagreed with Bush's retrograde and sexist opinion by a vote of 7-1. But alas, Bush wasn't deterred. To this day, he's still a member of an organization that doesn't allow women to join. He's been a member of groups that have a history of barring Jews and African Americans. Maybe we see some signs of that at the White House, but we shouldn't be affirming that on the Senate floor. One of these groups actually changed its street address after the city of Louisville renamed the street where the front entrance sits for the boxing legend Muhammad Ali. Think about that. Senator McConnell himself resigned from that same organization because, according to Lexington Herald leader, the majority leader said, he thought it was no longer appropriate to belong to a club that discriminated, and my impression was that the club did. But we're bringing to the floor to vote for a judge that still belongs, who still belongs. Leader McConnell went on to reference a commonly accepted Senate standard that federal judges should not belong to discriminatory organizations, saying, I thought if it was inappropriate for a federal judge to belong to an all-white club, it certainly wasn't something the United States Senator should do. So I guess the logic here is senators shouldn't belong to white-only club, but senators should vote for federal judges that can belong to a whites-only club. I agree with Senator McConnell. Senators shouldn't belong, but no federal judge should belong to a group with a history of discrimination, especially a recent history of discrimination. Bush regularly contributed to a conservative blog using a fake name. There he advocated extreme political views on issues, health care, campaign finance, LGBT rights, climate change, all critical issues that come before this court. The Sixth Circuit serving Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. He even cited white supremacist sources. We're going to vote for this man? He even cited white supremacist sources that push the conspiracy theory that President Obama was not born in the United States. I know that the President of the United States, the man who sits in the White House, also subscribed to those birther theories, and only late in his campaign did he say, well, I do in fact believe the President was born in the United States. He, at least, the President of the United States, the sitting President, candidate Trump, at least finally retracted that. Mr. Bush seems to continue to say that President Obama wasn't born in the United States. He cited those white supremacy theorists that pushed that conspiracy theory. He's expressed hostility towards women's right to make their own personal private health care decision in a 2005 public speech. Again, not in 1965 or 75 or 85, but in a 2005 public speech, he cavalierly repeated a hateful homophobic slur. And I would say that, but I don't think it's proper to use that language on the floor of the Senate. I also don't think it's proper to vote for a candidate for judge, a nominee for judge, that feels cavalierly that he can use that term. He said Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi should be gagged. He's attacked Senator Ted Cruz, our colleague in this body. Now, everyone's entitled to free speech, obviously, even if they choose to do it under a fake name. And Mr. Bush is entitled to his political opinions, no matter how offensive. I, of course, defend his right to say whatever he wants. I think others do too. But those opinions have no place in a federal court whose job it is to interpret the law fairly and impartially. Can Mr. Bush be trusted to put aside his personal views when considering the law? Even according to his own words, he can't. At Mr. Bush's hearing, my friend from North Carolina, Senator Tillis, asked Mr. Bush if judicial impartiality, quote, is an aspiration or an absolute expectation. Bush responded that impartiality is an aspiration. So in other words, not an expectation. He doesn't think he needs to be an impartial judge. He just needs to be able to say that he tried. To administer the law fairly and impartially is the #1 job of a judge. The ability to do so is the most basic qualification for the job. Judicial impartiality is a principle of democracy and the backbone of our government. It's the reason that African Americans and women can vote, that segregation is part of the past, that marriage equality is part of the past. I saw dozens of Democrats and Republicans last night at the Library of Congress listen to the words of Taylor Branch, perhaps the most noted historian of the civil rights movement, in an interview speaking to us about Dr. King having 1 foot in the scriptures and 1 foot in the Constitution as he advanced and advocated for civil rights. We know what that means for our country. Last night, I saw Republicans and Democrats coming together and celebrate that. Then today on the Senate floor, we're voting for somebody like Mr. Bush, who eschews all of those values that we hold dear as a country. It's Mr. Bush. It's the court. The courts are the reason that women can now attend the Virginia Military Institute. It's the difference between upholding and oppressing the rights of the people we serve. Think about this. The Obergefell decision, Obergefell versus Hughes in Ohio, it was a decision that guaranteed the right to marriage equality, came out of the Southern District of Ohio, initially appealed to the Sixth Circuit in Cincinnati. Imagine if a man who boldly repeated homophobic slurs had heard the Obergefell appeal. I mean, think about that. He thinks it's very acceptable and in public to make speeches and use homophobic slurs, and he's now sitting on the bench making decisions about this. Imagine if today an LGBT Ohioan or a Michigander or someone from Senator McConnell's home state or Senator Alexander's home state of Tennessee, they face this man in appeal. Could they be confident that their case would be decided fairly and impartially, that justice would be served? Can we be confident that it would when you have a man that will stand up in an event in a big city, the largest city in Kentucky, and engage in homophobic slurs? I've heard from both African American and Jewish organizations who are absolutely outraged at this nomination, partly because he is unfit to serve, partly because now, as Senator Whitehouse, my friend from Rhode Island and one of the best judicial minds in this state, or in this body, Senator Whitehouse has said if we confirm Bush, it's going to lower the bar in the future. Well, it's okay to say, to engage in racist talks or homophobic or misogynist talk. It's okay because Judge Bush did. He's sitting on the Sixth Circuit, so why not bring some more forward like that? Is that the standard that your votes today, the 51 members of this body that voted for them, is that the standard you want to set for the future? Organizations with a history of fighting for justice and equality have written to me opposing this nomination. Human Rights Campaign, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, Council of Jewish Women, the Leadership Conference, on and on and on. Mr. President, we have a responsibility to hold judges to the higher standard. The job demands it. The people we serve, the people whose lives can be forever changed by the decisions these judges make, deserve it. We cannot allow the bar to be lowered for what is considered acceptable behavior by members of the federal bench. Because as this bar is lowered, the faith of citizens in the courts and in this body falls along with it. That's the tone that we are setting. That's the precedent that we are setting. I'm not a lawyer. A lot of my colleagues who voted for John Bush to be confirmed they understand what precedent means. They understand what political precedent means in this body. I hope my colleagues, and I don't think they want that bar lowered because they know that if we do, as I said, the faith of citizens in the courts and in this body falls along with it. I hope my colleagues join me in opposing Mr. Bush and show to the American people that the United States Senate still has high expectations, that we still stand for decency and impartiality in our federal judiciary.